Today on our 2017 Jeep Cherokee, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Roadmaster EZ4 base plate kit with the removable arms, part number RM-5214447-4. So here's what our base plate looks like fully installed. This is going to allow us to flat tow our vehicle behind our motorhome safely and securely. When we're not towing, our base plate is going to feature an extremely low profile design, and if we come to the removable arms up here and we pull that tab, we can rotate it 90 degrees and pull it straight out. Now it's very less noticeable and hidden behind of our grill. Our removable arms are going to be quick disconnects. We're going to have a pull ring right here, which is going to unlock it, and then we're going to be able to rotate it 90 degrees and either remove it or to install it. We can put it in, making sure that we push in far enough that it'll release the ring, and we can rotate it and it'll lock into position, and we'll be ready to hook up our tow bar. Our base plate is compatible with all Roadmaster motorhome mounted and car mounted tow bars. Now this is a custom design, so it is designed specifically to fit your particular vehicle. And as far as the installation goes, there is no welding required, but there is some minor drilling that we're going to have to do. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let's show you how we get it installed. To begin our installation, I'm going to take our hardware and make sure that we have our pieces. Also, the manufacturer does recommend using some Loctite on all the bolts. So I'm just going to take a small amount and put it on the threads, and I'm going to let it set up while I'm getting ready to get the rest of our install done. That way we know they'll be secure whenever we put them in place. We're going to need to open our hood. Now we're going to have several fasteners that we're going to need to remove so we can get our radiator cover off of the support. We're going to need to remove all these push pin fasteners, and I'm going to be taking a flathead screwdriver, and if you notice there's a small notch on either side, so we're going to come underneath the center section of it and pop that section out, which will release the back section, and then we can pull the rest of the clip out. Now we're going to do this for the remaining 11 clips all around our core support right here. Now that we have the clips removed, we're going to go ahead and pull the cover off, and we're going to set it aside for right now. On each side we're going to have 3 fasteners that we're going to need to remove, and if we come to the very corner where our fender meets our fascia here, we're going to have 2 fasteners, and one of them is going to be right underneath the fender right here at the top. The other one's going to be right below that. And then the third one we're going to have to remove right about where the corner of our fender meets our fascia. If we look straight down, that's where the other bolt's going to be. Now I'm going to be using a 10mm socket to remove those bolts. And we're going to go ahead and remove the other 3 on the other side as well. If we come to our wheel well area, we're going to come to this trim piece along the edge of our fender, and we're going to grab it at the bottom, and we're going to gently start pulling it away because there's just going to be some clips holding it in place. And we're going to make sure to be careful while you're pulling it away because you don't want to break any of those clips. Now towards the bottom and coming up the outside of our fender liner here, we're going to have 3 bolts holding it in place. Now we're going to need to remove those, and I'm going to be using an 8mm socket to do so. Now we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side. On the bottom side of our vehicle, we're going to need to remove 4 10mm bolts holding our fascia to our core support. So I'm going to be using a 10mm socket to remove it. It may be necessary to loosen or lower down the skid plate to get these last few bolts out. And I'm going to be using a 13mm socket to lower down my skid plate. The bottom of our fascia, right in front of our front tires, right where our mud flap section is, we're going to have 2 pop rivets on the bottom, and we're going to need to drill those out. Now I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch drill. I'm going to be drilling right in the center of that rivet. Now if it begins to spin, you may need to grab the fascia and just apply a little more pressure so it can keep it from spinning. And we're going to do the same thing for the other rivet. If we come to our fender and we pull the fender liner back, we're going to see a bolt that's holding our fascia to our fender. It's going to be a 10mm bolt. I'm going to be using a 10mm socket to remove it. With this side removed, we're going to go ahead and move to the other side and remove that as well. Now on the driver's side, we're going to need to push back the fender again, and we're going to notice that we have a purple connector right here. Now we're going to need to disconnect it, so if we come up to it and we push on the tab, it'll unlock our connector and then we can pull it apart. Now we are going to have to remove the push pin fastener holding the connectors in place as well. So if we just follow our connector back, there's going to be a push pin connecting right here, so we can just grab it and we can pull it off. Now if you have a little bit of trouble, you can grab a trim panel tool or a flathead screwdriver and help pop it off. And just to be on the safe side, I'm going to remove both ends of my connectors from the core support. With an extra set of hands, we're going to go ahead and remove our fascia. So if we come to where our fascia meets our fender, we're going to pull away slightly, undoing the clips, working our way towards the center. Then we can just slide it off, and we're going to set it aside so it won't get damaged. With our fascia removed, we're going to notice that we're going to have this aluminum beam right below our bumper beam. Now we're going to have a few fasteners holding it in place, and I'm going to be using a 10mm socket to remove the nut. Now to remove the bolts, I'm going to be using a 15mm socket. Now we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side, and these are not going to be getting reinstalled. The stud that was holding that bracket in place, we're going to need to remove. Now I'm going to be using a cutoff wheel, and I'm just going to cut it as close as possible to the core support. Now we're going to need to cut it off both sides. Now also down here where we have that alignment tab, now we have the option of we can cut it off or we can get a hammer and flatten it out. I'm personally going to take a hammer and just hit it until it's nice and flush sitting against the core support here. It's never a good idea to leave bare metal exposed on your vehicle, so I'm going to come back with just a little bit of spray paint and touch that up to help prevent a little bit of rust from happening. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side as well. Now on the inside of our bumper beam here, I marked out the area that we're going to need to trim in our air dam. Now these hash marks are just representing what's going to be taken away, and that solid line here is where I'm going to be cutting. So I'm going to cut this entire section out so that it's nice and open right behind our bumper beam. Now I'm just going to be using a utility knife, and you can use whatever you have available. I just want to recommend that you be careful and be very conscious of where you're cutting, because we do have some AC lines as well as the condenser right here. Now, it's just hard plastic, so it shouldn't be too hard to cut through. Now with this side removed, we're going to go ahead and trim the other side as well. We're going to take our main receiver brace, and we're going to line it up with the holes with the bracket we just removed, and we're going to be using the same hardware that we pulled out. Now we're going to know that we have the right bracket on the right side. If we look at our bracket, the arm coming off of the big plate here is going to go slightly up, and we're going to have a tab that's going to have a hole in the side. That's going to be towards the outside of our vehicle, where the large hole or the receiver for our arm is going to be towards the center. Now once we have all our bolts in, we can go ahead and do the other side as well. We're going to take our arms here and we're going to put them in our main receiver tube. So we're going to slide them in. There's going to be a pin here, and you're going to want to push it until it pushes the pin in. Then we can rotate and it'll lock it into place. Now per the instructions, we're going to need to put those arms in and take a measurement. Now we're going to be measuring from the very center here between these two elongated holes across to the center between the two other elongated holes, and this measurement needs to be 28.5 inches. So we're going to double check and make sure that it is. So with everything looking good, we can continue with our installation. I'm going to come back, and again using a 15mm socket, I'm going to torque all my bolts down to the specified amount. And we're going to repeat that for all the remaining bolts. On our main receiver tube here, if we come to the inside towards the center of our vehicle, we're going to have two holes. We're going to be paying attention to the most rearward hole, or towards the back of our vehicle. And we're going to take our support bracket and we're going to line it up with that hole. Then we can take our 1/2 inch by 1 1/4 bolts, and we're going to slide it down coming from the top We're going to follow that up with a 1/2-inch lock washer and then finally a 1/2-inch nut. So we can go ahead and get it loosely threaded into place. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Our next step is going to be taking a few measurements, and we're going to need to drill a hole. So if we take a tape measure or whatever we have measuring tool we have, we're going to find the center point of our support brace here, which should be in line with the hole in our main receiver tube. And we're going to measure up 2 5/8 inches. And we're going to make a mark right at 2 5/8 inches and as close to center as possible, and we're going to need to drill a hole right there. I'm going to be using a 1/4-inch drill bit to start out just for my pilot hole, and then I'm going to come back and eventually enlarge the hole to a 1/2 inch. We are going to need to drill the other side and mark our holes and do the same thing on the other side of our vehicle. With our holes drilled, we're going to take our flat flexible piece of plastic, our Mylar washer, and we're going to slide it in between our support brace and our bumper beam here. We're going to line up the holes, then we can take our supplied 1/2-inch by 3-inch bolt, and we're going to slide on our 1/2-inch flat washer. We're going to slide our bolt all the way through our bumper beam, through the Mylar washer, and the support plate on the back. Then we're going to follow it up with a 1/2-inch lock washer and nut. Now once we have all this secure, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side as well. Now on our main support brace here, if we come to the very outer edge towards the outside of our vehicle, we're going to have a hole. Now we're going to take our other support bracket here, and we're going to want to make sure that the angle or that slope is going towards the center, and we're going to have a hole on the bottom of our bracket. Now we're going to take our 1/2-inch by 1 1/4-inch bolts, and I'm going to drop it through my bracket, and then I'm going to line up the hole on my main receiver brace with the hole in my bracket, and I'm going to feed my bolt through. And then we're going to follow it up with a lock washer and a 1/2-inch nut. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side as well. We are going to need to drill another hole through our bracket here and all the way through our bumper. So again, I'm going to be using a 1/4-inch drill bit to start out and then enlarge it to a 1/2 inch. And we're going to repeat that for the other side as well. Now just like before, we're going to take one of our Mylar washers, we're going to line it up, take one of our 1/2-inch by 3-inch bolts, go all the way through, and on the back side, we're going to take a 1/2-inch flat washer, 1/2-inch lock washer, and a 1/2-inch nut to secure it all into place. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side as well. On the back side of our fascia, we are going to need to remove our louver housings here, because that's where our arm's going to be coming out. So I'm going to be using a 7mm socket to remove the 2 bolts holding it in place. Now we're going to have another clip holding it in place towards the outside here. Now the way I'm going to remove that is I'm going to take my trim panel tool, or if you have a flathead screwdriver, you're just going to want to push in on the center of it and it'll come popping out just like that, and then we can slip the cover off and set it aside. Now our arms are going to be coming out right here, so instead of just trimming a small section, I'm just going to be taking this section of the grill out and cutting the honeycomb out. Now I'm going to be using a cutoff tool on my rotary tool here to cut that out. I'm going to come back and with a 3/4-inch wrench and socket, I'm going to torque down all my fasteners to the specified amount in the instructions. If you are using a supplemental braking system or perhaps some wiring for your taillights to tow your vehicle behind your motorhome, now would be a good time before we put the fascia back on to start running any of those wires. With an extra set of hands, we're going to put our fascia back in place. You're going to want to work your way around, making sure all the clips are going in, and start securing all the fasteners that we took out from before. Now, since we drilled out the rivets that were in the bottom of our fascia here, they do provide us with some new plastic pop rivets. And here I have a plastic rivet gun, and I'm going to go through this plastic trim piece, my fascia, and the inner fender well, and get my rivet put in place. And and we're going to replace all the remaining missing rivets. Now all we have left to do is put our radiator cover back and put all our plastic fasteners back in place. And that'll finish up our look at the Roadmaster Easy 4 baseplate kit with removable arms, part number RM-521447-4 on our 2017 Jeep Cherokee.
Click the link below to shop, learn more, or visit us at etrailer.com.